Hi, I'm Dustin. This is Revved Up Design, and today we're talking about custom light boxes. Today on Revved Up Design, we're talking about custom light boxes and how you too can make one for yourself in your shop. But this is not just a off-the-shelf light box. I actually made 100% of this guy. How did I do that? Well, I'm proud to introduce a brand new addition to the workshop, my brand new Creality K2 Plus. It is a 3D printer that is 350 by 350 by 350 square build area. Allows for very large down to very small items to be printed, to include our custom box here, which I crafted myself on Fusion 360. And then it allows us to make things that just wouldn't exist anywhere else, like this vent that I made for my window so that I could vent all my fumes outside after cutting on lasers or working on the UV. Or maybe it just wants to enable you to have a little bit of nostalgia in the form of these coasters for yourselves. Either way, today we're just going to be covering the light box, so join along with me and I'm going to show you how I turned blank plastic and acrylic and a little bit of wiring into this one-of-a-kind art piece that you too can make. So today we're going to go ahead and take a look starting in Fusion 360. Not that we're going to do any work in Fusion 360 right now, because that would make this a much longer video. But rather, I'm just going to show you the final product and then how we're going to get the different parts for the different machines that we're going to be using in order to create this product. We are going to be using all three modalities today, to include your laser, your UV make, as well as the 3D printer. So follow along with me and I will show you how that's done. Okay, so here we are in Fusion 360. You can see we have two parts here. We have the actual light box itself, and then we also have this just individual shape. This is the acrylic. So I wanted to make sure that not only did the box get created properly, but also that I had a piece of acrylic to slide into it. So there are two things that we need to get out of this file, one for your laser and then one for your 3D printer. So to start out, we're going to do the laser because that's the easiest one to grab. So we're going to do that just by clicking on this surface. We're going to hit Create Sketch. Click on the surface here. And that creates a sketch down here at the bottom on 28. I'm going to then right-click that and click Export DXF. On the right-hand side, it lets you see what the millimeters is measured in, as well as the sketch for the export. So that all is fine. I'm just going to hit OK. And then it's going to come up here and tell me where I want to export it to. At this point, you can rename it. So I'm going to call this, what do we want to call this? Lightbox. Acrylic. And we're going to hit save. Very good. And then the next thing we would need is a STL file for our 3D printer. But first things first, I want to shut off my sketches here. And I want to shut off that screen because I only want to export the box itself. So we would then hit File, Export, and then name your lightbox, and then choose the STL file type. Now, I'm not going to do this because I've already exported it, but that is the two files that we need from this device. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and jump into my Xtool software and start a new project. And we're on our P2S, which is what we want. We'll go to Downloads and load up the Lightbox Acrylic. And there you have it. And then I'm just going to change this to, Well, first we're going to do a couple things. We're going to change our material type to acrylic. And then we're going to change this to cut. And from there, we just need to go actually load the laser up with your piece of acrylic that you want to cut for the project. So I'll see you back as soon as I get that loaded. All right, I have my piece of acrylic loaded up, so I'm just going to go ahead and connect to my machine. And wait for the initial photo to be taken. Very good. And then we're going to do a measure. That'll get us our proper dimensions for... Oh, sorry. Change the mode. I had to adjust how I'm cutting this, so I just need to tell it that I removed the slats. There we go. And let's try to measure that one more time. There we go. Now I'm going to just turn this. And I'm going to do a zoomed in picture so I can get this placed as far over into the corner as humanly possible. That way I can get the maximum amount of material processed out of this piece of acrylic. Okay, I think that looks pretty good right there. Just going to cut the one for this project. That'll be fine. And we'll go ahead and hit process. All right, now let's take 1 minute. Go ahead and get that started cutting. And when we come back, we're going to jump into the 3D printer software and get that printing as well. Okay, we've got the laser going, but now we need to get our actual box going. So first, we're going to go ahead and open up the Creality software suite, which we have here in front of us. Next, I'm going to go ahead and hit Add, and I'm going to choose Lightbox, Open. Now this is always going to shove it onto the plate just in whatever orientation it feels like, so you will have to adjust these as you see fit. But the way I like to do it is click on the Lay on Face, and then choose the face that you want it to lay on. Now, you can get a couple of these boxes on the K2 Plus at a time, but this is actually a custom order that someone has put in. So I'm going to only be doing a single box because they requested something other than black plastic. So we're going to leave this as is for a single build. And then we're just going to go ahead and create our preferences for this device. So first things first, I want to add the fuzziness layer. Now, if you've not done 3D printing before, a fuzzy layer is simply going to be a pattern on the outside of the box. And this will enable you to get something other than possibly seeing layer lines. Depending on how good a quality of a printer you have, this does a lot to absorb a lot of imperfections in the printer. I'm going to choose the fill mode and just select the different parts of this box. Okay, we've successfully applied fuzzy skin to the entire area that I'm interested in covering. So that's good. Now let's go ahead and choose what we want to support and not support and the quality of the image overall. So generic PLA is fine. That's what we're going to be printing with. Actually, you know what? I take that back. We're going to be printing with silk PLA today. All right. Now, I'm still new to the 3D printing world, so go easy on me if you're a veteran. But I want to do topmost surface. I found that these areas right here in the corners of the print can sometimes not look the best coming off, so I do a little bit of ironing on them in order to smooth them out just a little bit to get rid of any layer lines. And we're going to stick with the basic settings here for right now. That's fine. Then we're going to go to supports, and we're going to allow supports. That's fine. That's what we want. And that's actually going to be the only changes that I'm going to make from the default. I found that these print quite well as is with these settings. So we're going to go ahead and slice it. This will take a minute just due to the amount of time it takes to get through these files. And there we go. We can see we've got little trees planted everywhere. Now, you can see here in the ridge that supports the acrylic that they go ham on these supports in here. That is very challenging to get out. So I'm just going to increase the threshold angle. And choose only build plate supports and reslice it. And let's see what kind of supports we get for this one. All right, much better. So we're just supporting the opening of the box that we slide our acrylic in on, and everything else should print just fine as is. We have a little bit of supports coming through and supporting the initial section of the box, which is fine. And then obviously along the base, because it's got a curved up portion, it provides a little bit of support while it's doing the wall building. Those are easy to come off. So we're going to go ahead and send this to the print. We're going to choose our requested color of pink and go ahead and hit start. Now, if this is your first time with seeing 3D printing, get ready to wait. It takes a little bit of time. Okay, and the printer is off and running. And finally, we now need to get our image ready for putting together our piece of acrylic for the light box. So how do we do that? Well, first I'm going to open up the photo that we're interested in creating this effect on. So I'm going to go to my files. All right, so here's the image that we're going to be working with. Now, we need to do a couple things. First off is to remove the background. And when we do that, we can see we've taken out the majority of our problems here, which is the background. But because the hair is a bit wispy, I'm going to add a second layer to the screen here. And then I'm going to fill it. And then just on the right-hand side, flip the layers. So now you can see the problem with the background removal. We have a lot of wispy hairs, and you can see a lot of color through this. On the test prints that I did for this, the wispiness of the hair caused a lot of issues with printing white, and you can see the white through the hair. So what I did was I went through and cleaned up the hair and got us to this image. I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to open up a new background and dump in paint bucket and drag it below. Now when you look at the hair from this layer to this layer, you can see that on both the man and the woman that we've cleaned up, gotten the hair just a little bit tighter in so that when it prints, it doesn't have that haloing effect of the white ink behind it. So that was step number one. If you want more in-depth steps on how I did this, we can always do that at a later date, but I don't want to make this super long for you guys. It's going to be long enough using 3 different machines. So we're just going to rush through this process. Okay, so we've established how to get the main characters pulled out of our photo, but we still need the background. We just need it in its own layer. So how do we do that? Well, I'm going to hit Control-I. Well, first, sorry, I'm going to select the layer mask here, and then I'm going to hit Control-I, and then that is going to give us our background image. So the fast and easy way that I did this, instead of sitting here and trying to pull in the different shapes and fill all of this, I took the easy route and I jumped into ChatGPT. I uploaded my file and I told it I wanted it to fill in that information. It spit out this one, which was almost there. It had the railing a little askew, so I asked it one more time and was able to get this image right here. So these are the small little time-saving tips and tricks that you can use. Or if you're not familiar with a lot of photo editing software and didn't want to attempt that on your own, this is also a good method to use nowadays. So we were able to fill in all of our background, and we now have 2 images, one of our subject and one of our background. So we're now going to jump over to Eufy Make and combine the 2. All right, I loaded up our acrylic onto the base. So we're going to go ahead and load our photos now. Go here, start with the background. I'm going to keep it original sized. And now what we need to do is, because we're printing a 2-sided object that we're going to physically be looking through in order to get the back image, what we need to do is flip this horizontally. So simply right click, flip horizontal, and we're good. Now, what I'm going to do is change this from 3 layers of white to just a single layer. And we're going to leave it on a single layer of CMYK. Now, before I hit print, I am actually going to add in our top layer. And the reason for this is alignment and sizing is much easier to do now, so to make sure that you get them perfectly aligned rather than later on. All right, so we can see here that we are lined up. Our bounding boxes are both tied together. So we can start by placing our object. And we actually are going to want to overrun the edges on this because it's actually going to serve us in our processing. And what do I mean by that? I mean that by leaving it large, we are going to be giving ourselves guides to put the acrylic back when we have to flip it over. So we just want to get this close, but we actually do want to print a little bit onto our bed. It will act as a natural guide to get us in perfect alignment when we have to flip this over. So now that we have both of these images here, we're going to click off, and then we're going to choose our layer panel. And we're going to shut off that layer. Now we're going to click here and crop the image because this is a little bit big still on the left-hand side. We don't need to print that much onto our bed. Just want to print a little bit. Okay, so we've successfully flipped our image to allow for that mirroring to happen once we get it onto the proper side. And we have put both images together and sized them together so that when we print the top one, it's also going to print in the same orientation, which is exactly what we want. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit print to get this side done. And go ahead and hit start. And I'll see you back in about 10 minutes. Okay, so just as before, on one of my previous videos I talked about using your outlines as guides. We are now going to take the guides that we left behind by overprinting on all 4 sides, flip this over, and that will enable us to lock it in to the exact same position to make it easy so that when we go back to the software, all we have to do is hit print on the next photo, because we went to the trouble of making sure that everything was lined up here and in the software before we started. So by doing both of those steps, we are now making our job easier. So we're going to flip this guy over, peel off the protective layer, and then place it down inside of the frame that we've created by printing directly onto our mat. So give me just a second to peel off the backing. Okay, and we're going to be very careful not to touch the surface so that we don't have to clean it, because it was already cleaned from the factory. There we go. And we can see through the light that we're actually able to see the picture from behind. And now again, just using the guide of having printed this already onto the mat, we're able to line this guy up just perfectly. All right, it is ready to go. So we're going to jump back over to the software and get the second side done. Okay, we find ourselves back in the Eufy Make software. We have completed the snapshot for the new art piece, and we're going to go ahead and shut this layer off. So what we want to pay attention to is when I shut this layer off, what the image does. Now I know it's a little bit darker to see this, but we can see that the image has now flipped the correct orientation because we're looking at it through the acrylic that we printed on. So I can now see the handrail of the ship right here. So we're going to go ahead and turn our top layer back on. Very good. Now, here is the key point that we need to be mindful of for our future endeavors. For this particular one, the shirt that the gentleman is wearing is a very light colored shirt. Because of this fact, the handrail, which is also very bright and white from behind, in my testing has found that it had a little bit of bleed through effect. So to counter this, what I'm going to do is actually create a contour. So I'm going to first copy this layer and then paste it down here, because I don't want to interact with both of them. I just want to interact with the one. And then I'm going to right click it and create a contour. Now what I want to do next is actually drag this layer off of our print bed. That way the printer does not look for it and does not try to print it. Then I want to add this layer here. And it did not show up. Try again. There we go. Drop it inside of our contour. Okay, so this is going to be a nice black shape that will create a dark section behind them, and then we will be able to add our standard layers of white and then CMYK so that it will help block out that color that's bleeding through from the rear. This is not going to be necessary for every single light box you do, just in the case where you have light objects behind that may bleed through from a light object in the foreground. So for this, we're just going to keep it simple. Go down to 2 layers of white, 1 of CMYK, and we're going to go ahead and hit print. And then as soon as this is done printing, I'm not even going to go out to the printer. I'm just going to hit snapshot again. And then we're going to put our original image back on top. Because if you remember, the last time I showed you a tutorial about doing the stained glass, you cannot stack layers up. If you were to stack layers up, they would not all print. You'd only get the topmost layer to print, even though it says to print inside of the software, and you can choose to print by layer. It's not something that currently is functional. So we're going to let this go through its print process and then immediately come back, take our snapshot, and reposition that photo on top of the contour that's currently there. That way we can print the color photo directly over top that black layer. So we'll see you back in another roughly 10 minutes. All right, we have completed our black layer and we're now back onto the software with the snapshot already complete. We can see here that we still have our contour and we have our picture off to the side, but that was just there in case of an emergency. I just wanted to make sure that I didn't lose the exact size of the image in case something happened with the contour. But I'm going to show you the fast way in order to get back to being able to print an image without having to try to line up the image and make sure we get it just right. So we're going to click on the keyboard and hold Control and hit Z. And we're just going to do that one at a time until we get back to the image. So once we're back to the image, we're going to click on it and make sure that our white and CMYK are in the levels that we want. 4 and 1 is actually perfect. So we are ready to send to the printer. But I want to show you in the layers panel what's going to happen when I shut this off. Now if you look, here's our black that's already been printed onto the acrylic. If I turn it on and off, we can see that it is in perfect alignment with the picture that is already here. So we know that because we didn't move anything, we're going to be putting this directly on top of the ink that's already there, and it will be a perfect mask to the existing picture. So let's go ahead and send this to the print and skip. And when we come back, we'll show you the next step we're doing for this very special gift. And we're done. All right, that is looking just beautiful. The surrounds look good. No edging around the edges showing in white. So we've got a good finished product there. Or is it? Now, as we spoke earlier, this is a gift that someone ordered, so they want to add one more thing to the front here. So we're going to go back to the computer and go ahead and do that now. So join me back in the software and I'll show you what we're adding for our final touches. All right, we've done our snapshot, so we are all set up for our final touches. That's going to be in the form of a text. Going to add a headline. Let's change that color of the text. Very good. And pick my font. For whatever reason, the first couple of pages of fonts require you to wait for them to load, and then after that, it all just flows magically. And then we're back down to smooth flowingness here. All right. That's the script I'm looking for. Very good. There we go. Sorry. And I'm just going to click off so that I can click back and adjust the box size. There we are. Let's shrink that down a couple of points. I think 32 will be good. Centering it on our points in between the acrylic. Easiest way is just going to be to refocus like that. There we go. Now we know we're centered on the acrylic. And I like the up and down orientation, so I think we're good right there. And we're going to change this to a flat raised. And we're going to drop this down to 0.6 millimeters because it still has the ridge to get into that frame, so I don't want to scrape on any ink when this is going in, but I do want to have a slight raised feature to it. All right, that looks good. We're going to send that to the printer. And then after we're done printing this last little bit, we can complete the project and we'll show you the finished product. Let's take a look and see how we did. All right. Nice finish. I'm going to bring you in close here. We did have one minor failure of one of the trees that broke free, but that's not actually going to affect the final print, so that'll all come off when we remove all of our support material. So otherwise, print looks like it did very, very nicely. I did let the build plate cool down, so they should snap right off. Let's go ahead and try to do that. Let's put you back on the tripod. And there we go, popped right off. A little bit of cleanup, and we'll be ready to move on to step number 2 on the box. Otherwise, everything else looks like it came out very nicely. So we'll get this cleaned up and we'll show you how to move forward. So we've completed our new light box. And a couple of features of this that I didn't get a chance to talk about yet in my design is that I printed a larger inner lip to make the sliding of the piece of acrylic in a little bit easier. I also included here and here on the side walls, not on the bottom where it would scrape the acrylic, but on the two side walls, little retention nubs so that once you slide your piece of acrylic in, it holds it there in place. So just things that help keep this piece a little bit more streamlined and less having to do with add-on things or taping or gluing in order to make the acrylic stay in place. So that was my thought on why to do that. Otherwise, it came out beautifully. Now, a word of note if you're going to do these either for yourself or for others. I normally would print all of these in a black PLA, but this is the color the customer requested. So I did have to explain to them that this lighter color is more than likely going to have some light seepage from the back of the box. So even though they requested this pink color, it is going to be a little bit of light bleed through when you get the lights installed. So we are now ready to move on to combine all three of our modalities into one completed project. So follow along with me now and we'll go ahead and get this guy finished. All right, I've got everything I need set up here on the work table. We have our printed box. We also have, to fill in these two holes in the back here, our power toggle and a DC power plug. This is not going to be battery operated. This is going to be wall powered. So that's how we're going to achieve that. And then we have a couple of overly sized wires that came with the switch. But since they already have the terminal ends on them, I'm going to go ahead and stick with them and use those. We are also going to be using some strip lighting. This is a 24 volt model, and there's two ways to do this. Option number one, which I'll show you in a different model that I've already done, is to cut individual strips and place them along the back, and then you have to solder to each set to the next in order to keep the chain going on power. On this one, because of the factor of light bleed possibilities, I'm actually going to wrap the interior, and we're going to be able to do that in a single go. So what we need to do first is measure out how much light strip we're actually going to need. So this does not have to be exact because we can wrap a second rung around, but just get it to where you're getting close. Alright, that looks like that will do it right there. And now the key thing to note on a lot of these strips is that there are points at which you can separate them. If I was to come here in the center and cut it, you would possibly damage the internals and it may not work. So make sure that you're cutting at the point to where it is manufactured to be cut. I'm just taking some snub nose cutters and right like that. So this is a two-sided tape adhesion process, but we're not going to stick it on just yet. We're going to go ahead and set that to the side because we don't want to stick that on before we get the ends soldered onto it. And we don't want to do that until we get the barrel plug done. So first things first is we're going to get the DC power connection done, which is the smaller hole. So I'm going to set that to the side, pull over my little helping hands, and attach this like so. Now in this particular model, the short pin at the top here is going to be our positive. So positive on top, negative on bottom. But what we have to understand is how we're going to attach this. So if we stick this plug in here, we need a wire that goes from here to here. So that needs to be fairly short. So I don't want a very long wire on that one. So I'm going to take this, fold over a loop, and go ahead and just cut it right there. Because we don't want a lot of excessive wire in the box for multiple reasons, but Mainly we just want it to stay out of our way. And then I'm just going to very gently trim off the end of this. If you have wire strippers, that works exceedingly well also. But if you're careful, you can do this with strippers, or side cutters, excuse me. And there we go, that's all we'll need. Just that little bit exposed. All right. So I'm going to turn on some fume extraction because I don't want to be breathing in smoke from the soldering iron. So we'll get that going. All right, we got the smoke extraction going. So if it's a little bit louder, sorry, but my health is more important than a little bit of audio quality. Now I'm using a heavy-duty soldering iron. That is not required to do such small, delicate work, but it's what I have, so that's what we're going to use. Just going to apply a little bit of solder to the post, and then we're going to apply some solder to the wire. And I'm doing this just on a silicone mat to prevent any damage to my work surface, as well as collecting any droplets of solder that may fall. There we go, we've tinned the wire successfully. Now I'm just going to hold it here, and because of the way that this mounts in the box, we need to keep these very snug. So I'm going to mount underneath on both wires. So I'm going to come in from the center and go up with this one, and then on the negative I'm going to come in from the center and go down, because we need to be able to put this A into the barrel sized hole that we created already in our model, and we also need to be able to get the ring nut on here that's going to secure it to the box. So from inside and up. And you'll feel when it makes connection. And then pull your soldering iron away. And there we go. Good solid connection. Yep, looks wonderful. So I'm going to now flip over the connector, so I'm coming up again. And we're going to apply a touch more solder. This time to the longer pin. Very good. And now this one, we're actually going to cut in half for a different reason, because we need to continue off of our power plug, and I'm going to do that half with this wire, and then the other half can go to the ground for this plug. So because we're doing that, I'm going to just go dead in the middle in half, like so, and give us a little snip. So this is going to be a direct feed off of this plug to our negative of our strip light. So that is going to be a straight wire-to-wire connection. So we are not going to use this plug for this side. This is actually going to turn into the positive coming off of our switch, off of our switch here. So this just set to the side for now. And this one, we're going to once again cut the end of the wire jacket off. So I'm just going to go around and score it with my side cutters all the way around. There we go. Okay. Just give it a light twist. And now we're going to add solder to this wire. There we go. Okay, that one is ready to go as well. But since we have it here, I'm going to go ahead and just flip it over and do the other side. Now this comes pre-cut, but we don't need quite that much, so I'm just going to trim that down to about half and twist as I do it. Very good. And then we'll tin that side as well. All right, we are fully tinned. So back to the other side. And from the middle and going up, It's obviously a little bit more challenging now that we have 2 wires going here. A little less space, but we'll get it.
One eternity later.
There we go. A little bit more challenging on that one. Just going to check both sides, make sure we have a good solid connection. Yep, looks pretty good. I'm just going to smooth out this section here so that it slides smoothly into the case. There we go. All right, now I do have shrink wrap to put on these, but it's very important that we get it threaded into the box first because it will not fit if you try to do it beforehand. So I'm just going to let this cool off for just a second. And we'll go ahead and thread that into the small hole. And there you go, we can see we've fully made it inside. Now we're going to take our nut and thread it over both the wires. Okay, once you get it over both the wires, just get it down to the base and the threads will engage. Once you get the threads engaged, take it to the very bottom, and then you can twist from the outside while holding with your hand. This doesn't need to be bolted down to any insane torque spec, it just needs to be snug and it won't go anywhere. Now that we have that fully installed, we can add our shrink wrap. Now we don't need this much, so I'm just going to cut this in half. Same for the black. Very good. And just slide and drop it down. Now for this one, I'm going to have to take off my rubber boot and replace that after I get the shrink wrap on. And there we go. Replace my boot. Now we're going to apply a little bit of heat to shrink that heat shrink. Okay, now I hope it goes without saying that you are inside of a plastic enclosure here. So you want to do this quickly, you do not want to linger. So make sure that both of your pieces of shrink wrap are seated all the way at the base. And then treat and come out, treat and come out, treat and come out, treat and come out. And just keep repeating until you get your heat shrink fully melted without melting your enclosure. And I'm continuously touching the sides to make sure I'm not applying too much heat in here because we don't want to warp anything. And the main thing is just that we get that heat shrink to provide some separation. So it doesn't have to be 100% shrunk. We just need to have it, make sure that it's fully touching so that it's not going to cause any problems down the road. So that's what we've done there. We're now done with the box again for a moment. We're going to jump to our tape light, and there are 2 notifiers on here that we need to pay attention to. And it's right here we have a negative, and right here we have a positive. So that's how we know which side is negative and which side is positive. I'm just going to take my heating iron and I'm going to just scrape away with the heating iron any covering that's on this plasticized copper pad so that we can actually get a little bit of solder and therefore the wire to stick to it. I'm going to do that on both sides. Okay, I'm just going to come back with my screwdriver and scrape off any remaining plastics that are on there. Very good. Okay, Now, we're going to jump to our cutoff that we did. And remember, we are going to make this our positive extension. So first things first is, again, to expose some of the wire. There we are. We'll go ahead and tin that. There we go. And the way you know that it's tinning properly is that the solder will actually melt from the top of the wire. So that way you know that you have full penetration of the wire, because you're melting not from the iron, but from the actual wire itself. All right, now, as I said before, we saw that this side is the positive side and this side is the negative side because of our two indicators. So we are going to put this wire on this side. But first, we're going to tin the pads on both sides. Now, these are a little finicky, so I found that resting the iron on the pad and bringing the solder to it are pretty much the best way to get this to attach to the pad itself. There we go, that one's fully tinned. Do the same thing on this side. And there we go, fully tinned. All right, we're now going to take our positive wire, because this is the side that is positive, and we're just going to lay them on top of each other like so. And for the same reason that we said previously about knowing that you're getting the wire wicking hard enough, is that you're melting the solder not only on the wire itself, but on the pad. So once you've achieved that, and let it dry or cool for a second, you should be able to tug, like I'm doing here, and nothing's coming off. So that side has successfully been attached. Now we bring in our box, and this is the more challenging of the two. So I will try to do this so you can see it. But the general idea is this. We need to attach this wire here. We need to attach this wire here, like so. So I'm unfortunately not going to be able to pull you in any closer than that for this one, because this requires some delicate balancing, but that's what we're doing. Just going to adjust my fume extractor to get it close enough to actually do something here, now that the box is kind of blocking me. And I know these look like my side cutters, but these are just pliers, so don't worry, I'm not damaging the strip of wire. And you just want to get it positioned over the pad, and then melt the two previously tinned items together. All right, we are. Give it a little tug, and we are fully secured. All right, so we can shut off the fume extractor because we're done with that. And we can shut off the soldering iron because we're done with that. And now we're just going to install our plug. So this is just a single wire plug. There's no light associated with it, so you don't have to have any grounding. So just power in, power out. Does not actually matter which way you go. And I did make it snug, so you will have to do a little press. There we go. And then it seats in there quite nicely and does not want to fall out. Again, we can just plug in our two wires that we already heat shrank, just like that. So we have our, so as you can see it, our wires into the plug. Those are both positive, and then our single negative coming off of the strip of light. So now all we're going to do is work this around the box and untape it and stick it to the inside. So follow along and we'll get that going. Now you want to do this to where you're providing a little bit of strain relief for the wires. You don't want to keep them taut, because if you do that, you're going to have problems down the line. And we're trying to avoid any problems with your projects. So take your time here. Try not to touch the sticky tape so that you can get maximum adhesion. And there we are. So we can see that we have a little bit of a loop here to allow for a little bit of tension relief. And then all the way around, we have our light. I'm just going to give it a little extra press to make sure everything's stuck well. Because we don't want this falling off once it gets delivered to a customer. And there we go, finished project. So we can see on the back we have our toggle and we have our power plug, which is a 24 volt in this case for these specific type of lights, a 24 volt light rail. And from the back we have a nice little plug and power switch on this side as well. So everything was pre-modeled in for its size and space, and it all came together just nicely. So let's go ahead and get the acrylic put in and we'll show you the finished project. And there we go, one finished project. So let me grab the box that we created and we'll put it all together and show you how it looks. So now we're going to use this slot right here at the bottom to load in our acrylic. And remember what I said before, we have a nice lip here on the front that's going to hold the acrylic, and we have nodules at the sides here and here that are going to keep it from sliding back out. So if you do like this design, you can replicate that in your own. I'm going to be very careful when I get to the text and lift up the lip, because I don't want to scrape any of it off. All right. Just making sure it's fully seated, and there we go. Alright, so now that we have proper lighting going on, I'll show you the finished product with the light on. And there you go, you can now see the mountains and the water and the ship rail and everything. And it comes across as a cool light box project. Now again, as we spoke about before, you do have some light bleed due to the lighter material. So if you are going to be selling these for yourself, just make sure that you know, or that the client that you're making it for know, that they're going to have a little bit of light bleed on lighter materials like this. But it still turns out a very nice product. So I did want to show you the other option for wiring the lights. So this was my first one. It works beautifully. It's just a lot more soldering involved because I cut and soldered on ends at each one of these points in order to make the connections and keep it continuous all the way up. So this is also an option if you want to go this route, but I do think that surrounding the build plate is just as easy, because no cutting, no soldering, just the single connection and you're done. This is a lot more involved, and obviously you need more wire. So if if I was going to tell you to do it, I would stick with the one I showed you on the pink box and just do circular around the box. It throws almost the same amount of light. Otherwise, let's talk about takeaways for today's video. So what are you going to need to do this project? Well, for starters, you need the box. If you like my design, I will be having these available on my Etsy store, so you can get the raw box by itself. You will also need some semi-transparent acrylic. I picked mine up from Maker Stock. I went ahead and included a link to them in the description below, so you can find those there. I will also include links for the power plug that I got off of Amazon and the switch that I got off of Amazon, so that you too can replicate this design, because these holes were specifically made for these two items. So I will include both of the links for these products so that you can get the exact same fitment that I have here. Then the only other thing you're going to need is some string light and the power supply. So I personally used a Cobb brand string light. It came with a power plug, but obviously there's a lot of light that comes with it, so I purchased a few extra power supplies, and those power supplies fit this particular DC power port on the back here. So as long as your DC power port fits the same dimension as the plug that you get with your Cobb light, you should be fine. This is a 5.5 by 2.1 millimeter DC barrel jack. So as long as your power supply measures in those same forms, you'll be good to go. Other than that, you'll just need to have a picture that you are going to split in two so that you can have the front and the rear, and your Eufy make, because that's how you're going to print it. Now, to answer a couple questions for you guys before you even ask, why didn't you just 3D print the entire box? Couple reasons. Mainly because while you could have gotten the front very easily done on the Eufy, it would have been incredibly challenging to get the back of the piece of acrylic, or in this case the 3D printed filament, to take a picture without completely blurring out from being too high off of the print bed. Because we have to keep that print head within a certain level, this design allowed me to slide it in, or excuse me, allowed me to print on it, then slide it in to avoid the issue of not having access from the rear to print that back picture. So those were my reasonings behind the development of this project. And the fact that the slot is on the bottom right here, no one's going to see it because it's going to be sitting like this, and it's got those retention knobs on the sides, so the acrylic doesn't just flop out if someone were to pick it up and look at it. So in my opinion, this is the best option, because it's not side loaded, so you're not going to see a line on the side, you're not going to see light bleed out on the side. If you do have any light bleed out, it's on the bottom right down here, which is on the countertop anyways, so that's not the end of the world. In my testing though, I didn't see any light bleed, but the pictures I used had a lot of color at the base of them. So your mileage may vary depending on what you're printing. But I hope you got a lot out of this today. If you like this project and you want to see some more like it, please go ahead and follow me and leave us a like, leave a comment if you have some suggestions for future videos. And until next time, have a great one.